People often tell me that I don't smile enough, but give me a good track and a good motorcycle, I'm grinning in the helmet. When I did my first couple of rallies, I looked at what was the toughest thing to do in this sport. And it was easy to find the answer. It was the Dakar. I think the biggest mental barriers are basically betting on yourself and then putting all your finances into something like this, knowing that this could very well put you in a hospital. I'm Ashish Raorane. I'm a motorsport athlete competing in cross-country rally races across the world, and most notably I've been at the Dakar rally in the Malle Moto category, one of the few Indians that have actually ventured into that category. It's kind of my dream that more and more athletes from India make it to the Dakar and see what the rally raid world is about.
5 a.m. on a Friday. Too early for most people, but not for Ashish Raorane. The 42-year-old Indian rally raid athlete is all set for a morning of intense training at his off-piste racing academy training ground. Ashish has a simple goal: to compete in as many Dakar rallies as he can, going it alone as a privateer without the support of a factory team. It's a hard journey that's involved quitting his job in the Merchant Navy and switching professions to become a riding coach, training other rally hopefuls, but also training himself for his next tryst with the sand.
Sand has a very peculiar way of teaching you lessons and putting you in your place. It'll really teach you not to take anything for granted. Like, you're cruising one moment and the next moment you plant your face down there.
Ashish first got on an off-road motorcycle in 2015 and was instantly hooked. By the end of the next year, he'd gone rallying, competed in his first off-road rally raid event, the Raid di Himalaya, and decided he'd like to see how far he could go in the sport, all on his own.
It's one of the few sports where, as an amateur, you can go and race against the top athletes in the world in the sport. When I did my first couple of rallies, I looked at what was the toughest thing to do in this sport. And it was easy to find the answer. It was the Dakar.
And he began attacking his goals with a single-minded focus, even when he was on duty at sea. It marked a departure from the life he'd led until then.
I wasn't a risk taker at all.
But he soon realized the qualities he'd developed as a mariner came in handy for the sport he'd become obsessed with.
The sea has taught me to be alone and still be able to find solutions. I think the quality of resilience kind of started building there because I didn't want to quit what I had started and see it through.
Once the decision had been made, there was no looking back.
For me, I thought it was a midlife crisis, to be honest. And then it just became a crisis, like a big crisis. Now I've made my peace with it, I guess. He was a pretty big guy, and I told him, you're going to kill yourself with this weight, right? And he said, okay, and he went to ship, and he was back in 3 months, 11 kgs lighter, just because I challenged him to lose that weight.
For Ashish, it was a huge comfort that Tanya had his back no matter what. As someone venturing into motorsport at the age of 35, going from rookie to Dakar competitor was an immense endeavor, especially given that he needed to figure the sport out by himself.
It is a super difficult challenge, especially for somebody who's that old, with no background in motorsport whatsoever, or the finances. It's a big chunk of money that you would put in. I think he did it all by himself as well, with a few sponsors.
I have to admit there has been hesitation and doubts. Like, you do wake up some mornings thinking about, is what I'm doing right?
Thoughts that were hard to ignore ahead of his first marathon event, the Africa Eco Race in 2020.
What I hadn't planned for, or let's say ever thought about, was that I would get something like dengue 2 weeks before the rally, and that's what happened. And I was in the hospital for 2 weeks, starting from like 11th of December, I remember, and the rally starting 2nd of Jan, right? So I came out of the hospital like 27th of December, and I was clearly told by the doctors that I should not be going to this rally.
But for Ashish, giving up before the event began simply wasn't an option.
The question to really ask is, if you stop now or if you give up now, would you be able to live with the outcome of that decision? And I think that's how I have kind of learned to make decisions now. That's what the sport has taught me, because if I give up now, okay, that's the easy way out now, and I would feel good for a while. But then what about tomorrow? Would that decision still make me happy?
Recovering from illness was just one worrying aspect. As a privateer on a shoestring budget, his motorcycle was a compromise. Not a full-blown rally raid machine, but a KTM 450 EXC, an enduro bike fitted with an extra fuel tank. 8 days into the rally, things got tricky.
I had some issues with the motorcycle and I was running out of fuel, so I had to stop. But the place where I stopped was literally middle of nowhere. And because it wasn't a medical emergency, I wasn't choppered out. I had to wait for the sweep truck to get there. But the sweep truck only got to me the next morning. So I spent the whole night in the cold desert. As the sun went down, it started getting really cold, chilly, and there was a sandstorm. And the other thing I had to worry about was then scorpions and snakes in the desert, because I saw a few just around sunset. I did my best to put into use whatever survival training I have, even from my background as a mariner.
Once again, Ashish's experience battling stormy waters helped him battle misadventures in the shape-shifting sand.
Sometimes we went like crazy 50-60 hours of work because you're in the middle of the ocean, you got to fix what's not running. I have always continued to work until I've solved the problem, but I never thought of it in those literal terms of, is that the spirit of never giving up? I guess that was there, but probably the motorsport angle has reinforced that or brought that out for me a little bit more.
He spent a full 12 hours in solo survival mode.
You never really think that, in today's day and age, you would ever come down to such a rudimentary thing of using a compass or just a rescue blanket. But that night it came to that. So yeah, I think it's an adventure I would remember all my life.
And an adventure Tanya won't forget in a hurry either.
My heart, the entire day, like I could feel this choking sense, and I told the service team, like, till as soon as you guys get word of him, please get him a phone, so at least we can hear his voice, and then I'd be fine. Everything else we could manage, but as long as we can hear his voice, I think that's the bare minimum that you would ask for.
The experience only strengthened Ashish's resolve to compete in Dakar 2021, and he began training for the event's toughest category, the Malle Moto class, in which riders compete without a support crew. Instead, they have a box with spares and tools and service and repair their motorcycles on the go on their own.
My first experience was that of isolation. You just feel so alone, because if there's a team, you move together, you have other riders with you. So it's a very lonely experience in the beginning. One of the things I quickly realized, and it's probably the mistake that most first-timers in Malle Moto make, is if you keep pushing yourself to still go through that entire checklist every day at the expense of rest, that's not a good strategy to have, because the machine will take a lot more than actually the human can.
The point was further driven home when CS Santosh, the first Indian rider ever to compete in the Dakar, suffered a horrific crash on the fourth stage of the same event.
Santosh and I trained extensively before the Dakar 21 in Spain. We were there for 3 months training day in and day out together. And after that we went to Dubai, we trained together, post which we went for the Dakar. So at the start of the stage 4, I said to him, I'm just so tired today and just so fatigued, and he was like, what, just get through today and you can get your rest tonight. When I came upon the crash site, I knew it was a hero bike, and I was just hoping that it wasn't Santosh's bike. I saw like how badly the bike was mangled, so I knew that it was a bad crash. And he was already airlifted, so I didn't know what had happened to him, like how bad the injuries were.
It was the first time he was truly confronted with the risks the sport involves.
Until someone you know personally gets injured, that risk doesn't become real for you, because it's still an isolated thing. Like you hear, okay, somebody crashed, and we know, yes, that can happen. It becomes very real when it's someone you know. And I think that was kind of very disturbing for me for the next like good 50-60 kilometers. At that point I didn't know the next day would be me being choppered out.
Despite managing to put thoughts of his injured compatriot behind him, Ashish's own Dakar unraveled on stage 5.
I went over a dune and I landed straight on my head. This was not a very high speed crash. Because I landed on my head, I think the impact was very high, and when I tried to get up, I immediately blacked out. So consequently, 10 minutes later, I was airlifted.
The injury meant he missed 3 stages of the rally but was allowed to continue the event under the Dakar Experience category.
The general advice was, okay, everything's clear, but it's a concussion in the end, so it could show up 72 hours later as well. So the recommendation wasn't like, okay, you can go race, but be cautious. So yeah, I really enjoyed the rest of the race. Overall, it was a good experience to finish the rally. Not the finish I was hoping for, so I was kind of sad about it. Like I had finished the Dakar, yet I had mixed feelings because I wasn't at the actual finishers podium. But yeah, that's something to correct next year.
Ashish has accepted that injuries are par for the course.
I have both my shoulders are separated, 7 millimeters and 11 millimeters, both sides. And your regular run-of-the-mill fractures and knee injuries, PCL tears. There's been a lot, but like I said, I've been lucky so far where there haven't been injuries that have required extensive surgery or anything, or put me out like more than maybe half a year.
But the real barrier he's had to leap across is the hurdle in his mind.
I think the biggest mental barriers are basically betting on yourself and then putting all your finances into something like this, knowing that this could very well put you in a hospital.
The costs of competing in the Dakar are astronomical. And as a privateer, finding the money to go racing is a constant battle, something that requires
a lot of patience. It takes time to make your mark in the sport. Things don't happen overnight because the financial burden is also so big. And when you're out there trying to garner sponsorships, things take very long to actually materialize.
In 2021, Ashish funded 90% of his Dakar campaign himself, putting all the money he earned into the race. Things have since changed.
This year looks way more promising on that front. So I think it's going to be exactly the opposite. I would hazard like 90% would be sponsored and then 10% through my funds.
The privateer life means Ashish is used to doing things on his own. He's his own nutritionist and fitness trainer, he's his own mechanic, and everything happens in his apartment or at the off-road academy he founded nearby.
I would like to be remembered as one of the best motorsport coaches rather than athletes, and that's what I'm working on now. Today you need to build that confidence with this soil, and then you'll be okay on the dry.
I don't know whether it's me or the bike. I need to figure it out.
It's not the bike.
Here though, I lost it.
It's not the bike.
Every time I brake here, I think he's really hard on us, but at the same time, he also knows when to hold back. And he's been super supportive from the start of my journey. I wouldn't be where I am or where I want to go without Ashish, I would say.
Like when you use the front and
The guy is a legend, right? So training with him is an overstatement, but learning from him is a great honor. We want him to achieve whatever that he wants to achieve and help whichever way we can, and that's the ultimate goal. If it's Dakar, it's Dakar.
For the 2024 Dakar, Ashish has been accepted in the Moto class, not the Malle Moto category. So he'll have the luxury of team support. But he's got a sense of unfinished business when it comes to the event's most punishing category and hopes for another outing in the Malle Moto class someday.
Given that the Dakar itself is so tough and Malle Moto kind of adds another layer of difficulty to it, so I've always wanted to do difficult things.
In the meantime though, he's training in earnest for his next battle with the dunes and desert, with Tanya by his side.
We've always done stuff together actually. It's nothing like I don't know about, and we always talk about stuff. So I knew what we were getting into. I didn't know how severe it was going to be, but yeah, I guess it worked out. You could be crossing a road tomorrow and meet with a terrible accident. Of course, the odds are much higher in motorsport. You just take a breather and you go with the flow, I guess.
Not having someone who is trying to talk you out of it, for example, because in the end starting that late and then putting pretty much everything you earn into it, that's not an easy thing for anyone to accept. So I think without that support probably I wouldn't have gone all in.
To Ashish, the months of hard work, the financial burden of the Dakar and the brutality of the event are simply part of the journey, worth it in his endless quest to reach an environment in which he truly thrives.
People often tell me that I don't smile enough, but give me a good track and a good motorcycle, I'm grinning in the helmet.
But even the devout question their faith.
Sometimes I do wonder who invented this sport. I mean, there's so many forms of racing, right? But this is like really out there. I sometimes really wonder why are we doing like cross-country rallying? Why not something else? The closest we have come to understanding it is this whole concept of you go through highs and lows, and I think that is what makes it so addictive. It's the highs and lows that keep you going back for it. I think the feeling of not just finishing a rally, but the feeling of just finishing every stage is really good. And I can't remember a single rally where the last 2 kilometers where I haven't cried in the helmet. It's just the emotion that you can't control.